Next on Intimate Portrait. She was the daughter of a musical legend, but it was her own phenomenal voice that took the music world by storm.
Natalie is a fun-loving, down-to-earth, incredible singer.
She carries something in those genes that's just special.
Her remarkable vocal skills have delighted audiences for 25 years.
She's the very strong and special human being.
She personalizes everything she's touched.
But a crippling drug addiction nearly put an end to her career and her life.
She didn't have the means or the ability, really, even to take care of herself.
The music came first, and that's what rose to the top.
I'm Patrick Stewart. Join me for a remarkable fable of tragedy and redemption with a princess, her king, and a fairy tale ending.
Natalie Cole is going to survive, and so her music's going to live on.
Natalie Cole, an intimate portrait, coming up next.
I never imagined that I would want to be a singer. I mean, it was just not part of my makeup or my desire. From very early on, I wanted to be a stewardess.
The daughter of legendary singer Nat King Cole and his wife Maria, Natalie Cole was born on February 6, 1950. Nicknamed Sweetie, she was energetic and eager to explore.
I was a tomboy. I must have felt that my dad wanted a boy.
Natalie was a very rambunctious little girl, always doing something. Not necessarily bad, just always into things. You know, she was just very active.
A former singer with Duke Ellington, Maria Cole raised Natalie and her older sister Carol with formal manners, taste, and culture.
I looked up to her. She was very much a lady, and she was bigger than life to me, which is ironic because when I think of my dad, I don't think of him the same way.
Although outwardly quiet and humble, Nat Cole broke racial barriers in entertainment when he became the first black singer to have his own network TV show.
Well, he was really the king. He really was, because he was a wonderful person. He was just such a great musician. He played magnificent piano, as good as anybody could play.
He was very friendly. He was very warm. He would hardly turn anyone away, which I know drove my mother absolutely crazy. And I think I got a lot of that in me. I know I do.
Nat's considerable talents were always high in demand. As a result, his shows often took him away from his family.
I liked everything my dad liked, even if I didn't like it, because he was not around that much. So I would want to get involved in whatever he was doing when he was around so we could spend that time together.
The Coles became the first black family to live in the affluent Hancock Park district of Los Angeles. For young Natalie, it was a prosperous and sometimes sheltered life.
My dad was performing in Mexico City and took us down there. And it was the first time that I had seen such poverty around me. I was brought up in a very lovely home in a beautiful neighborhood and couldn't imagine what it felt like to not have all the things that I had. I did take that for granted.
In 1959, Maria and Nat adopted a son whom they named Nat Kelly. Just 2 years later, Maria gave birth to twin girls, Timolyn and Casey.
I think some of my happiest moments were holidays, because that was full family, lots of people, lots of food, lots of presents if it was Christmas.
Through her father, Natalie was exposed to some of the greatest voices of the 20th century, including Pearl Bailey, Nancy Wilson, and Harry Belafonte.
These people were aunts and uncles to me, you know. They were nice people. Really great, warm, fun-loving. They loved what they did. And when you look back on something like that and figure you're like 7, 8, 9 years old, what a life I had.
Although she had never imagined a career in music, Natalie got her first taste of life in the spotlight when she was just 11 years old.
My father was doing a show called I'm With You, and I actually asked if I could be in the show. I don't know what came over me to do this, but He said, okay, but you have to audition. And I said, no, are you kidding? I have to audition. He said, yeah, you have to audition. So I did. We went down to the studio, and he had me sing this song, and of course I got the part.
In September of 1961, Natalie made her professional stage debut at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles.
Opening night, I was absolutely beside myself with fear. And I said to my dad, I can't do this. I'm going to laugh, because when I'm nervous, I usually start laughing. And I said, I think I'm going to laugh, Dad. And he said, if you laugh, I'm going to whoop your butt. So I managed to get through it, but I was so nervous.
She reminded me a lot, even more in later years, of her father once he walked out on a stage. They were comfortable out there, and she was even then.
Even though I didn't know then that's what I'd be doing, somewhere it just kind of settled in the back of my brain somewhere. And when it came back, boy, it came back with a vengeance.
In the fall of 1964, when Natalie was 14, Maria and Nat enrolled her at the Northfield School for Girls in Massachusetts.
The day that I went to register, my father took me. And I was so proud of him. I was so proud to be his daughter. Everyone was, you know, crowding around him, and oh, I was like, you know, the big thing. But that was the last time I saw my father healthy. And when I saw him again, he was very, very sick. He was not the same person.
A lifelong smoker, Nat Cole was diagnosed with lung cancer in December of 1964. By February, he was dying.
It was a very trying time. He went through a lot of agony, again, because we didn't have the medicine even that we have today.
He knew he was dying. It was just a traumatic, devastating time for our family. It was just bad. And 9 days after my birthday, he died.
I think her heart was broken, and she didn't get to see him before he died. She saw him at the funeral parlor, and he, of course, looked good. And he had on his tuxedo, and he was Nat King Cole then.
On February 18th, 1965, the man with the velvet voice was laid to rest. At his funeral, Hollywood's biggest stars came to pay their last respects. Nat Cole was just 45 years old.
Another
Nat's death immediately threw Natalie and her family into a state of emotional turmoil.
It wasn't necessarily the most natural thing for us to get closer. Instead, we kind of, you know, fell apart, grew apart.
It was devastating to the whole family. I tried, but it just seems that there was never enough of me.
My mother changed. Our relationship changed. All the relationships changed. We were a very broken family. We really were.
For a month, Natalie remained at home until her mother finally convinced her to return to school.
My grades weren't affected too badly, and I knew that was important to my mom, that I do well. But inside, I was pretty much a mess. So I kept the image up of being okay on the outside. It was important to her. And I think that's who I really was trying to please, with my mom. And I stayed there another year, and then I came back to Los Angeles. By then, I was pretty screwed up.
But back at home, Natalie became increasingly alienated from her mother and soon began to rebel.
I got arrested for shoplifting.
She just thought she was being smart.
I don't know what was going on up there, but that was important to me that particular day to see if I could get away with it. And I think that was the beginning of the end for me. My mother was ready to send me to Siberia, you know, because she was so mortified.
I was upset, of course, and they did not arrest her, though, but they caught her.
And they took me into this room, and the guy says, and you are the daughter of Nat Cole. Oh, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. So you're getting that expectation, that pressure that you are not living up to the standard you're supposed to, and shame, 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 shame on you. And that's where it all starts.
Natalie's relationship with her mother grew even more strained when she suddenly announced that she wanted to join a band.
When I was around 17, 18, I started thinking about singing. And I told my mother that I think I want to quit school.
I just wouldn't ever think of my children not going to college as long as I had a dime. That was first with me.
And she said, absolutely not. If you do that, I will never speak to you again. You're going to finish your education, blah, 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 blah.
I said, well, fine, go ahead, but don't come back here. I said, you're going to support yourself? Can you handle it? And, you know, I don't remember her answer, but it was something flipper thing. And I said, that's the only way. And of course, she never went.
And so I couldn't stand her for that period of time. I thought she was just like the worst parent in the whole wide world. And at that point, I wanted to get as far away from home as possible. And I went to University of Massachusetts in Amherst, which was one of the best times I had.
Next, as Natalie gains her independence, she discovers a new voice and a new vice. I'm Patrick Stewart. We now return to Natalie Cole, an intimate portrait. At the age of 18, Natalie put her music dreams on hold to study medicine at the University of Massachusetts. While there, she made a major discovery about herself.
I didn't know I was black until I was in college. I mean, this was a shocking revelation. So I ended up going from a little white girl in black skin to a serious black sister with the afro, and I worked for the Black Panthers, and I was a revolutionary, and my mother was absolutely dying.
She had that hairdo that they wore then, the hair all over just like this, and her flip attitude. It was just nothing that I approved of, nothing at all.
Everything was just coming at me, and because I was in an independent state, I really could do whatever I wanted, and all the things I hadn't done, I think I decided to try.
Like many college students at the time, Natalie began to experiment with illegal substances. Although it began innocently, her drug use would one day consume her life.
We were trying all kinds of drugs, you know, like acid, quaaludes, uppers, downers. I don't know how I got through it. It's just God's grace. It's just meant for me to just get through and come out on the other side.
During the summer of 1971, 21-year-old Natalie applied for a waitressing job at a local pub, but the owner had something else in mind.
I filled out this little application. He said, well, you're Natalie Cole? I said, yes. And he goes, well, you're Nat King Cole's daughter? I said, yeah. Don't you sing? Well, you know, a little. And he goes, well, why don't you sing? Why don't you just put a band together and come in here and sing on the weekends?
Natalie and her band performed an eclectic mix of music, covering everyone from Janis Joplin to her idol, Aretha Franklin, and the crowds loved it.
We were tearing it up. So by September, when school started again, I had this kind of steady job at the Amherst pub. And of course, I was afraid to tell my mother. So I didn't. By the time I graduated, I had jobs lined up.
In 1972, Natalie graduated from college with a degree in child psychology. By then, she was already a veteran of the nightclub scene, having sung all across the Northeast. But she often found herself in the shadow of her father's legacy.
People knew who I was, and they kept waiting for a song by Dad, and it never came. And there were a couple of times when the person that was hiring me would say, well, don't you sing any of your father's songs? No. Oh, well, why not? And I remember the first time I did do that, and I did Mona Lisa. The whole audience started crying. I was so mortified. I said, that's it. No more Nat King Cole songs for me. And so I didn't for, God, a long time.
But as Natalie's singing career continued to prosper, her personal life soon took a shocking turn.
I was dating this guy who was a heroin addict, and I didn't know it. Until one day, he was hanging out with a bunch of guys, and they were all sticking needles in their arms. And rather than common sense, rather than, you know, turning around and saying, oh, I don't want any part of it, I like, ooh, what's that? Ooh, I want to see too. And that day was the first time I had snorted heroin, and eventually became addicted within about 6 months.
Natalie managed to conceal her heroin addiction and continued to perform in clubs, determined to succeed as a singer. She even consulted an expert, her mother.
My mom took me to an agent in New York, and she said, if you're going to do this seriously, then we got to go to the right people. And I tell you, I really worked a lot until I started getting into so much trouble with the heroin that I couldn't do both.
At the age of 23, Natalie was arrested in Canada for possession of heroin. Although she was placed on probation, Her drug use continued and her work began to suffer.
I was starting to either miss shows, miss planes, or just be so out of it. I even got fired from a job that I was doing in New York because I was not up to par at all. And I remember that I was kind of out of it on stage and kind of like, you know, nodding, and so I got fired.
But even drugs couldn't mask the fact that Natalie had real talent. In 1974, she met the songwriting team of Chuck Jackson and Marvin Yancey. It would be the beginning of a long and prosperous partnership.
Their biggest dream was to write for Aretha Franklin. And when they heard me sing, for some reason, they heard Aretha. And so all the stuff that they started writing was kind of right down alley, particularly the first song, This Will Be.
Jackson and Yancey produced a demo tape of Natalie, which they sent to every label in L.A. But the only door that opened was at Capitol, the house that Nat built.
Capitol was the last record label that I wanted to go to because I didn't want to do anything that my father was doing. Ironically, it was the place that ended up saying, you can do whatever you want. We'd just like you to come be on our label.
It's natural for a child not to be like their parent. So she broke through as an artist and proved to herself and to her other fellow artists that she was a stand-up singer. She could do it.
Released in 1975, Natalie's debut album, Inseparable, was an instant smash. And This Will Be became a top 10 hit.
It blew everybody's mind because it was so funky and she had so much feeling, you know.
It's a classic, some of those classic kinds of songs. You know, classic Aretha-esque.
She was right front and center for what was going on at that time.
But Natalie was barely able to register her overnight success.
The record came out, and I was still on heroin. And the day that I first heard This Will Be on the radio, I was in New York, in Harlem, walking down 113th towards the house of my dealer friend, to get some stuff. And This Will Be came on the radio. And the irony of that was like a frozen moment. And I stopped for a minute, but I kept right on walking to my dealer's house.
Through the efforts of a close cousin, Natalie was able to finally get clean of her heroin addiction.
My cousin was a very prayed-up woman, and I ended up being sick all night. And she was back there praising the Lord, and every time I got sick, she'd praise him some more. And that was the last time I touched it.
Now free of heroin, 25-year-old Natalie became the toast of the music industry and the darling of the media. But when the press hailed her as the next Aretha Franklin, they inadvertently turned her musical mentor into her public rival.
Most little black girls who are trying to grow up and become singers, you know, from 1965 on, I think people looked for the Aretha in them.
The media really pitted us against one another. And I knew it wasn't true, that I was trying to take anything from this woman. But I think it kind of got to her. And it affected our friendship for quite a few years.
By the end of 1975, Natalie, Marvin, and Chuck were already hard at work writing songs for her next album.
Chuck, Marvin, and I formed a really tight, strong, unbreakable relationship with each other. We really just loved each other. We were like brother and sister.
But unbeknownst to her, Marvin had a different kind of collaboration in mind.
Marvin asked me for a date, a real date. And it was really kind of cool because he waited, I know it was killing him, to wait till we finished this record. And I saw him as a different person, and the next thing I knew, we were really in love with each other.
At the 1976 Grammy Awards, all eyes were on Natalie and Aretha, who were competing for the title of Best R&B Female Vocalist.
Natalie Cole.
She had won that category 9 years in a row. And I was devastated that I would have been the one to take it away from her instead of feeling good.
Natalie walked home with 2 Grammys for Inseparable, including Best New Artist of 1975. In less than a year, she had become a star. While Natalie's next album was in production, her relationship with Marvin grew more intense. In July of 1976, they were secretly married in Chicago, where Marvin was pastor of his own church.
Everybody loved him, and everybody loved me, and I really felt it. And it was, for me, it was the beginning of a sense of family again, and that's what Marvin gave me. He loved his church, and he loved his music, and he loved me, and I knew that for sure. And that's what made our relationship so special.
Coming up, as Natalie's career rises, her life is nearly destroyed. I'm Patrick Stewart. Now back to Natalie Cole, an intimate portrait. In 1977, Natalie was at the peak of her form, both personally and professionally. Her hit song, Sophisticated Lady, earned her a 3rd Grammy Award, and in October, she and Marvin welcomed their first child, Robert Adam Yancey. By 1979, Natalie was earning $100,000 a week in Las Vegas, 4 times what her father had made. And although disco was then topping the charts, she held her own with an impressive string of top 40 hits to her credit.
The records being made there then, for the most part, were producers' vehicles, which the singer was just an incidental part of. And then there was Natalie Cole.
I didn't make just hit records. I made albums. It was like painting a picture. One song was not the picture. It was always 10 songs at least. That was the complete picture for me.
The 1970s were a decade full of excess, and inevitably, the combination of Natalie's fame and wealth led her down yet another path of self-destruction. It would be the beginning of a downward spiral that would nearly destroy her life.
I stayed sober for probably almost 40 years. And with the success that we were having, again, just being young and dumb, I started off into, and kind of pulled Marvin in, getting off into cocaine. And everything went downhill, right into the toilet.
Clouded by drugs, Natalie soon began to develop a reputation for being difficult, prone to fits of rage and arrogance.
I had no conscience during that time. In some ways, the cocaine was worse than the heroin and the things that it made me do, because my life had changed so much. So I had responsibilities. I had a son and a home to take care of and a career to really protect, and I didn't do any of those things.
Natalie's relationship with Marvin began to deteriorate, and in 1980 they divorced. Although 3-year-old Robbie stayed with Natalie, her self-destructive behavior left her careless and indifferent.
I would not be truthful if I didn't think that this had affected my son. Children are very vulnerable and very sensitive, and I know that Robbie knew something was going on with me.
Rumors about Natalie's drug problem had been floating around the press. Though she boldly denied the charges, her unhealthy physical appearance spoke volumes.
My daughter was always tall, and she was the size of a string bean, and I just couldn't understand it.
I guess it was a combination of what she would think of me and what it would do to her, that I kept that from her.
We had a long time where we did not have much conversation, and I think I sort of really didn't realize how bad it was.
Despite their rocky relationship, Maria eventually discovered the horrifying truth about her daughter.
I went up to her house, and I said, "What kind of maid does she have? What are all these straws lying around the house for?" I said, "Everywhere I go there's a straw." And when that was explained to me, then I realized how devastating it really was.
On October 2nd, 1982, Maria Cole petitioned the Los Angeles Superior Court for control of her daughter's estate. Natalie did not object.
She had made a lot of money, but it was mostly gone, and she didn't have the means or the ability, really, even at that time, to take care of herself.
Pressured by her family to get clean, Natalie entered a drug rehab clinic in October of 1982, but after only a month she left. In interviews, when she told the media that she was finally clean, she was often high on drugs at the time.
I remember the night before I did Good Morning America, I got totally blithered. My concern, my last concern was, what about people who might know me being in here? I was in a daze. And I really probably, a part of me believed I was telling the truth, that I was going to be okay. The last couple of days before I left, one girl said to me, "Do you know that I just realized who you are?"
Wow.
And when she said that to me, I just realized who I was.
Wow.
And I said, you know what? I said, I think it's time for me to go.
With Robbie safely in the care of his nanny, Natalie's downward spiral continued, both personally and professionally. Although Marvin had remarried, she persuaded him to re-team with Chuck for her next album, I'm Ready. But the reunion was doomed.
I'm absolutely ashamed of that album. Everything was wrong. It was a bad time in my life. I was in the final throes of my drug addiction. The songs really weren't that great. My voice was in really not good shape. And the album really should have been shelved. It should have been. And of course, no one took the hit, but yours truly. And that's not really fair.
I'm Ready sold less than 50,000 copies. Natalie's career had hit rock bottom. Although the record industry began to turn its back on Natalie, she managed to find a new manager who agreed to help get her back on track.
The interesting thing about Dan was that when he came to me, he actually believed that I was going to be a success again. And I had given up. I really had.
I felt that once she took care of her personal distractions, that she could attain any goal that she set out to.
I couldn't understand how this man could still believe in me. He said, I believe you can still make some home runs. I'm just kind of looking at him like, you're right. And he said, but we got to do something first.
Dan Cleary took Natalie to the Hazelden Foundation in Center City, Minnesota, where she began an intense 30-day treatment program.
I thought, this is the end of my life. I'm going to die here. And nothing is fair, and poor me, and I hate this, and I hate everybody. And I was a very angry, messed up, troubled soul. And then something happened. The last week, maybe, before the 30 days was up. And I said, I don't know when I'm coming home. I don't think I'm ready. And that was the turnaround. That was like, God, she's got it. She's really got it. And so I went from hating to be there to being afraid to leave, which is exactly where you're supposed to be. And when I came out in May of '84, it was beautiful. And I felt fat and afraid. Those are the feelings that I had for a long time, but I was sober. And to see the world sober, it was almost like I'd never seen it before.
Natalie's 6-month treatment gave her a rare opportunity to really examine both her career and her life.
It taught me how to finally do something for me, and not for my mother, not for the legacy of who I was, not for my then fans, not even for my son. I had to do this for me. And it was the first time that I had a chance to really look at myself, and it was the best thing I ever did. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. The best, best, best. I've been sober for 16 years, praise God. But I've still done some stupid things. Now I'm just human. You know, there's a big difference between being human and being addicted to drugs and trying to be human too. So now I'm just a human person making good old-fashioned mistakes.
Coming up, Natalie gets her second chance and becomes a musical legend. I'm Patrick Stewart. We now return to Natalie Cole, an intimate portrait. At the age of 34, Natalie began the difficult task of rebuilding her career. But because of her past drug problems and her lackluster record sales, music executives still refused to give her a chance.
I had, in a way, burned a lot of people. And I think that there was so much disappointment when I lost control that they were afraid to put the effort back in again.
They didn't feel that she had the opportunity to make any kind of a comeback, and that her career as a recording artist was over. So it was very, very difficult.
It took about 5 years to kind of get back to the place where I felt, at least professionally, that I could stand up next to a few people.
Natalie also began to repair her relationship with 7-year-old Robbie. It was important that she remained sober for him because in 1985, Marvin suddenly died of a heart attack. He was just 35 years old.
We were no longer married, but we had kept our relationship very friendly because of Robbie and because we really still did love each other. And a part of me did die with him. I know that now in just the way that I talk about him and the way that I feel about him still. And that's a good thing, to have had that.
In 1985, Natalie released her comeback album, Dangerous. The sales were modest, and it would be another 2 years before she was finally back on the charts.
Every artist in the world will go through a plateau that you figure they're never going to come out of it. And a lot of them don't. But she's not a traditional lady. This is just not what you're dealing with.
On her 1987 album, Everlasting, Natalie took a chance on a new style of music and wound up with her first hit in nearly a decade, a cover of the Bruce Springsteen song, Pink Cadillac.
For her second career, for her to take that approach as opposed to more hardcore R&B soulful stuff, you know, was very daring. But once again, that's what makes her persevere. She does what the heart calls out for her to do.
I didn't stop taking those risks. I hadn't lost that. You know, I was just taking the risk in the right spot now. And so we did, and it paid off.
When Everlasting was nominated for a Grammy, the music industry once again took notice. Natalie's next album, released in 1989, was aptly titled Good to Be Back.
That's exactly how it felt. It was good to be back.
While recording the album, Natalie fell in love with its producer, Andre Fisher. In September of 1989, at the age of 39, she married him. But the pressure to produce more hit songs began to get to her.
It was becoming more difficult for her to be a pop artist. I always say that the greatest thing you can do is retreat and attack in another direction. And that's exactly what she did.
In 1990, Natalie finally decided to take on the challenge of recording her father's songs.
I was just ready. Something inside of me was like ready to say thank you. Not just I love you, but thank you. I had resolved those demons that had kept me in guilt all those years.
I don't think she had any expectations. She just wanted to be true to the art form and have fun, and she did.
Unforgettable.
The highlight of the album was its title track, which used new studio technology to pair Natalie and Nat in a magical duet.
When we recorded Unforgettable, the orchestra was like, they could hardly play because they were gasping when they heard his voice come in and hearing her sing. And it was almost like he was alive again, you know.
My mom actually came down to one of the sessions here in Los Angeles, and I was overjoyed that she would even do that, because my mom is very protective of my dad's memory, and I don't blame her. And I think she was really quite moved by the whole process of it.
When they did it the first time, I cried, of course. I just broke down. It was very hard for me. I don't listen to my husband's music very much, and this was very, very difficult.
That's why, darling, it's incredible that someone so unforgettable thinks.
I remember the last day, and all of us sat in the studio and listened to the record from top to bottom. There wasn't a dry eye in the place. And we all walked out slapping each other's backs and saying, okay, whatever happens after this, we don't care. And, you know, we figured the jazz community would appreciate it, and the Nat King Cole fans would appreciate it, and fine. That was it.
Who knew that something like that would get on the radio? We didn't know. I mean, we just thought we were making great music. And then guess what? The public bought it anyway.
Unforgettable became one of the biggest surprise hits in music history, hitting #1 on the pop charts and selling over 9 million copies worldwide.
Unforgettable was an event, and that's what distinguished it from the rest of the things that were being released. You know, the airwaves parted.
The Beatles generation now have 2 or 3 children. All of a sudden they started saying, hey, our parents really weren't that wrong. This is pretty nice.
It had a sense of history in it, and connection, and good music, and great talent on her part and her father's part.
To a great degree, I think people wanted to kind of downplay the success. But the night of the Grammys, you couldn't. It was just there, and it was like in your face. Gotcha. Gotcha totally off guard.
The record of the year, Unforgettable. Natalie Cole, producer David Foster.
Unforgettable swept the 1992 Grammys, winning a total of 7 awards, including Song of the Year, Record of the Year, and Album of the Year.
I remember getting up to accept an award one of the times that I got up to accept an award, and I said, I really didn't think we were going to win. And everyone else went, oh, yeah, right. But I mean, you just don't, because we know anything can happen, and it changed my life. It had already started to change my life, but it changed my life. I did things, traveled places, met people, sang with people that I don't think I would have ever had the chance to if I hadn't taken that turn. It gave me a chance to get all gussied up and dressed up and just put on those pretty gowns, and oh, I was just having the time of my life. And it's like we started a little bit of a trend. There's more jazz out there now, almost like, you know, we're back in the 40s or something. It's very cool.
With Unforgettable, Natalie's career soared higher than it ever had before. But the album also gave her success in more personal areas.
As you get to a certain point, you re-embrace your family in some way, whether you're in show business or not. She did it in a way that a lot of us are not even blessed with, which is to be able to sing about and to her dad.
I can't think of anything else she could do with him that would be as perfect as that was.
I like to think that it was a big step towards healing for all of us. And I didn't mean for it to be that way, and I certainly didn't know it was going to be that way, but I do think that it helped.
I'm Patrick Stewart. We now return to Natalie Cole, an intimate portrait.
I love you.
After Unforgettable, Natalie became one of the most revered performers in music, playing to sell-out crowds all over the world.
I think the reason that people respond to her is for the same reason that people respond to anybody who expresses himself. It's the honesty behind it.
People know she's genuine. She walks on the stage and you know it.
At the end of the day, the person, no matter who their parents are, they're going to have to deliver or not deliver. And Natalie definitely delivers.
When she gets in front of a microphone, everything kind of slows down and this voice comes out. It's silk. There's just no other way of describing it.
But Natalie's triumph came at an unfortunate price.
The kind of success that Unforgettable gave to me, as well as to my then husband, Andre, it was a little overwhelming. He wanted very much to win for Producer of the Year, and he didn't get it. And I think it really crushed him. And we were already experiencing problems in our relationship, and that didn't help any. It was a big night. Sooner or later, it just, you know, bit by bit, it just really crumbled. And when it crumbled badly.
In 1995, after a turbulent 3-year separation, Natalie and Andre finally divorced.
Pick yourself up.
Always reinventing herself, Natalie made her acting debut at the age of 42 on the TV series I'll Fly Away. Since then, she has carved out an acclaimed new career as an actress.
I don't believe it.
What?
All this time you've been coming here, you've never asked me out to dinner.
Look, I ain't never had no job before. I didn't have nothing to offer.
In addition to many charitable causes, Natalie courageously shares her experiences with drugs in an effort to help others.
It's still very therapeutic to talk about it, and it's also very educational. for people who think that this could never happen to someone who's brought up in a nice home, or who's brought up well, or who's brought up with values, or in the right culture, or that has nothing to do with it. With everything that was provided for me, I just didn't have what it took to stay above ground. And that's why I talk about it.
Natalie is never far from a microphone. Released in 1999, Snowfall on the Sahara showcased her incredible musical diversity with an eclectic mix of R&B, soul, and pop.
It's almost like I took a sabbatical from this kind of music for the 7 years that I've been doing the standards. So when I got ready to do this music again, I was just ready mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and I think you can hear it. I think you can hear it in my voice.
She has moments in this new album where she rocks out. Trust me, she is just the queen of that.
There's a part of me that's still very rebellious as an artist, and that is I will not allow anyone to put me in a niche. I just won't allow it. I ain't having it. And so I keep changing up just when you think you know me, because it's all who I am. I am a bit of a chameleon.
Today, Natalie lives in Los Angeles and maintains a close and loving relationship with her son, Rob, who is now a college graduate and a budding musician.
I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up being in this business big time. And I'm going to make sure I stay around as long as I possibly can to make sure he does. That's my deal with me and God.
After years of estrangement, Natalie and her mother are finally coming to terms with their relationship.
Our relationship gets better and better. She's reached a point in her life where she understands probably why a lot of things happen like they did.
One thing that I've always known, even though I wish I could have heard it more, was that she's really proud of me. And I know that. I can see it.
It takes a lot of understanding and a lot of communication, which is where I think we have erred. There has not been enough communication.
She's not a terribly demonstrative person, but every now and then she'll just give me that squeeze and that hug, and it's so great. And that's really all I think that daughters want from their moms. She wasn't too wrong about a lot of things that she told me when I was growing up. I hate that, but it's true. So, Mama's cool. I love her.
Though Nat Cole died a decade before his daughter's first hit song, there's no question what he would have thought of her success.
Nat Cole, if he were living today and saw what's happening to Natalie, he would be over the moon.
He would have been very proud of what she's done.
I don't even think he would have been as concerned with the music as he would have said, this girl is really something. She has really gone and done something like this. I think he would be so pleased with me that I would have had the guts to do it. And I think that he would have liked.
It's been 25 years since Natalie Cole took the music industry by storm. And although it's been an often difficult journey, she remains grounded in her life and in her music.
I'm proud of the woman that I am today, with everything that's happened, every single thing. I'm proud of the family that I've come from. For me, creating music is a part of my being. It's something that kind of comes out of me. I love feeling the audience. I feel them holding me. I think some of it is because of the kind of music I've been doing, is that they feel touched, and so they touch me back. And I can feel that. And that's really cool. That's a beautiful thing. 9 years old. What a life. What a life I had.
Although she had never imagined a career in music, Natalie got her first taste of life in the spotlight when she was just 11 years old.
My father was doing a show called I'm With You, and I actually asked if I could be in the show. I don't know what came over me to do this, but he said, okay, but you have to audition. And I said, no, are you kidding? I have to audition. He said, yeah, you have to audition. So I did. We went down to the studio, and he had me sing this song, and of course I got the part.
In September of 1961, Natalie made her professional stage debut at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles.
Opening night, I was absolutely beside myself with fear. And I said to my dad, I can't do this. I'm going to laugh, because when I'm nervous, I usually start laughing. And I said, I think I'm going to laugh, Dad. And he said, if you laugh, I'm going to whoop your butt. So I managed to get through it, but I was so nervous.
She reminded me a lot, even more.
Next on Intimate Portrait. She was the daughter of a musical legend, but it was her own phenomenal voice that took the music world by storm.
Natalie is a fun-loving, down-to-earth, incredible singer.
She carries something in those genes that's just special.
Her remarkable vocal skills have delighted audiences for 25 years.
She's a very strong and special human being.
She personalizes everything she's touched.
But a crippling drug addiction nearly put an end to her career and her life.
She didn't have the means or the ability, really, even, to take care of herself.
The music came first, and that's what rose to the top.
I'm Patrick Stewart. Join me for a remarkable fable of tragedy and redemption with a princess, her king, and a fairy tale ending.
Natalie Cole is going to survive, and so her music's going to live on.
Natalie Cole, an intimate portrait, coming up next. Maria Cole raised Natalie and her older sister Carol with formal manners, taste, and culture.
I looked up to her. She was very much a lady, and she was bigger than life to me, which is ironic because when I think of my dad, I don't think of him the same way.
Although outwardly quiet and humble, Nat Cole broke racial barriers in entertainment when he became the first black singer to have his own network TV show.
Well, he was really the king. He really was, because he was a wonderful person. He was just such a great musician. He played magnificent piano, as good as anybody could play.
He was very friendly. He was very warm. He would hardly turn anyone away, which I know drove my mother absolutely crazy. And I think I got a lot of that in me. I know I do.
Nat's considerable talents were always high in demand. As a result, his shows often took him away from his family.
I liked everything my dad liked, even if I didn't like it, because he was not around that much. So I would want to get involved in whatever he was doing when he was around so we could spend that time together.
The Coles became the first black family to live in the affluent Hancock Park district of Los Angeles. For young Natalie, it was a prosperous and sometimes sheltered life.
My dad was performing in Mexico City and took us down there. And it was the first time that I had seen such poverty around me. I was brought up in a very lovely home in a beautiful neighborhood and couldn't imagine what it felt like to not have all the things that I had. I did take that for granted.
In 1959, Maria and Nat adopted a son whom they named Nat Kelly. Just 2 years later, Maria gave birth to twin girls, Timolyn and Casey.
I think some of my happiest moments were holidays, because that was full family, lots of people, lots of food, lots of presents if it was Christmas.
Through her father, Natalie was exposed to some of the greatest voices of the 20th century, including Pearl Bailey, Nancy Wilson, and Harry Belafonte.
These people were aunts and uncles to me, you know. They were nice people, really great, warm, fun-loving. They loved what they did. And when you look back on something like that and figure you're like 7, 8. imagine that I would want to be a singer. I mean, it was just not part of my makeup or my desire. From very early on, I wanted to be a stewardess.
The daughter of legendary singer Nat King Cole and his wife Maria, Natalie Cole was born on February 6, 1950. Nicknamed Sweetie, she was energetic and eager to explore.
I was a tomboy. I must have felt that my dad wanted a boy.
Natalie was a very rambunctious little girl, always doing something. Not necessarily bad, just always into things. You know, she was just very active.
A former singer with Duke Ellington